Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me give you a weekly update on the events with regards to Russia-Ukraine military conflict in eastern Ukraine between April 3rd and 9th. Combat activity in the war zone continues to show signs of relative improvement following the ceasefire regime introduced in the end of March by the Trilateral Contact Group in Minsk. Thus, with the introduction of the truce, the number of enemy attacks has decreased 1.5 times on average. This includes the five-fold reduction of attacks using heavy weapons. According to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, on average, the militants fired up to 48 rounds against Ukrainian positions daily, while before the truce this number averaged 420 shells per day. Additionally, the militants used neither rocket nor cannon artillery, as well as no tanks, all across the front line throughout last week. The number of enemy mortar attacks decreased from 200 episodes down to 60. At the same time, the enemy sniper fire activity remained unchanged, 24 episodes throughout last week. To sum it up, last week the number of ceasefire violations committed by Russia-backed militants decreased in comparison to the previous week. The lowest number of militant attacks, 25 incidents using gunfire and 4 mortar shellings, was registered on Wednesday, April 5th. Yet the average number of enemy shellings of Ukrainian positions amounted to 45 episodes per day. According to the military intelligence, Russian proxies made preparations for the Victory Day celebration. Occupational forces scheduled a military parade in the Donetsk city center with the involvement of heavy weapons, particularly T-72 tanks, multiple launch rocket systems Grad, towed howitzers D-30, and Msta-B, as well as self-propelled howitzers Gvozdika. The total number of military hardware amounts to 26 units. This action demonstrates a complete disregard of Minsk agreements by the Russian occupational forces, since all tanks and artillery must be withdrawn from the front line. Now to the more detailed timeline of combat activity over the last week, analyzed by the sectors. Luhansk sector. The enemy significantly decreased its fire activity in the sector. Last week there were 2 incidents of enemy mortar attacks. Both of them were short-term. However, the militants continued to open fire with small arms and grenade launchers at positions of Ukrainian armed forces, predominantly in Stanitsa Luhanska, Krymske, and Popasna area. The daily number of ceasefire violations by the enemy ranged between 2 and 8. Donetsk sector. Last week the situation here remained tense despite the decision of the Trilateral Contact Group in Minsk to cease fire before Easter holidays. The militants continued to use mortars on a daily basis. About 70% of enemy mortar attacks took place in Avdiivka and adjacent area. The highest degree of combat activity in the sector was registered on April 3rd, when Russia-supplied militants opened mortar fire 7 times. They fired 90 mortar bombs at positions of Ukrainian defenders in Avdiivka. The positions of Ukrainian armed forces at Svetlodarsk, Gorlivka, and Donetsk airport were regularly fired upon with small arms and grenade launchers. Militants occasionally used infantry fighting vehicles at Donetsk airport area. The daily fire activity of the enemy ranged between 7 and 26 episodes. Mariupol sector. Last week, the militants continued to actively open fire with small arms in the Pavlopil-Shirokino area. However, most cases of the enemy mortar fire were registered in the northern part of the sector, namely in Krasnogorivka, Marinka, and Novotroitsky. Invaders regularly used infantry fighting vehicles near Shirokine and Vodyane. Enemy snipers opened fire in Pavlopil and Novotroitske. On April 4th, Ukrainian defenders detected the subversive group moving across the front line near Mariinka. After a half-hour firefight, the enemy attack was disrupted. Ukrainian armed forces incurred no losses during the incident. The daily number of ceasefire violations by the enemy ranged between 9 and 31. Last week, Ukrainian troops registered 8 episodes of hostile drones conducting aerial reconnaissance in the ATO area, mostly in the Donetsk sector. Ukraine's military intelligence reports of the ongoing military assistance of Moscow to its proxies in eastern Ukraine. Last week, 3 cargo trains with 1,520 tons of fuel arrived in Luhansk and Rovenki railway stations. Also, a Russian military convoy consisting of 3 tanks and an infantry fighting vehicle transported on trailer trucks, as well as a bus with military personnel, arrived in Debaltseve. As per intelligence reports, the total number of casualties among Russian proxies is 16 killed and 21 wounded last week. Last week, 2 Ukrainian servicemen were killed in action. This includes 1 soldier who died as a result of injuries received from booby trap explosions. In addition, 1 more serviceman who had incurred wounds near Avdiivka in early March this year died at the hospital on Monday, April 3rd. 28 Ukrainian servicemen were wounded in action last week, including 2 who suffered wounds in booby trap bomb explosions. Our hearts go out to the families and friends of the fallen Ukrainian heroes. 4 civilians were injured in the conflict area last week alone. A woman and a man suffered injuries in booby trap explosions in Troitske, Luhansk sector, and Verkhnyotorets, Donetsk sector, respectively. Also, 2 men were wounded in the course of militant shelling in Avdiivka, Donetsk sector, and Mariinka, Mariupol sector. Additionally, 4 residential buildings were damaged in Avdiivka as a result of enemy fire last week. Ukrainian authorities arranged for access and safe passage of 19 trucks with humanitarian aid for civilians living in the occupied territories of eastern Ukraine. The aid was provided by the International Committee of the Red Cross. The trucks carried more than 150 tons of food, building materials, personal hygiene products, and medicine. That will be all for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pidgornyy. Are there any questions or clarifications? If none, on this note, the briefing is over. Thank you.
Thank you.